In the world of high-end audio, $230 isn't a lot of money, especially when those $230 gets you a pair of two-way active bookshelf speakers with Bluetooth, dual RCA inputs, and a subwoofer output. The big question, of course, is how do they sound? So let's dig into the Edifier R1700BTS.
I'm Alan Perkins, lead analog designer for MoFi Electronics, and this is the new Master Deck. What does the turntable sound like? Really nothing. It's a table with a very, very low noise floor, really no background noise. You forget wondering if the speed's stable because it's so stable. You're just listening to the music and enjoying it, and I think the purest form you're going to hear.
I'm Aaron Jenkins, and here on the Absolute Sounds YouTube channel, I review entry-level high-end products, as well as products that might work well in real-world spaces, and at first glance, the Edifiers certainly appear to fit both bills. First, some history. Edifier was founded in Beijing in 1996 and first sold speakers to the Chinese domestic market. It then expanded across Asia, then South America, and into Europe before arriving in North America about 15 years ago. Its business model here is primarily online. On Amazon, its $150 R1280T active studio monitor has 19,000 reviews and presumably many more total sales, while Turntable Lab sells Edifier speakers with and without an accompanying Audio-Technica turntable. There are a few models available in the real world, though, at Best Buy and at some brick-and-mortar record stores, such as Amoeba Music in Los Angeles. Wherever you find it, Edifier produces an impressive number of speakers. There are currently 80 different models spread across the Edifier and the named for the Greek goddess Hecate lines, the latter being a mix of speakers and headphones designed specifically for computer gaming. The Edifier line encompasses dozens of bookshelf, computer, home theater, and portable speakers, ranging from the $70 single driver R19BT Bluetooth speaker to the $1,000 S3000 Mark II bookshelf, which pairs a planar tweeter with a 6.5-inch aluminum cone midwoofer. There's also the 6-model AirPulse lineup, which includes 5 speakers designed in conjunction with Phil Jones, the founder of Acoustic Energy, and feature ribbon tweeters and, in most cases, aluminum cone midwoofers. So that's the big picture. Now let's get to the R1700BT lowercase s. The company views this model as kind of the next step up from the aforementioned R1280T, which is essentially the base bookshelf model. And to that end, the R1700BTS features more power, deeper bass extension, the subwoofer output, and a distinctive 10-degree reclined front baffle. Closely related to the BTS and sharing the same cabinet design are the $220 R17BT, which is essentially the same speaker without the subwoofer output or sound field spatializer function, which I'll talk about later, and the $270 R1850DB, which offers more power and digital inputs. Anyway, each R1700BTS features 2 drivers, all of which are driven by a Class D amplifier. The 19mm 3/4 inch Silk Dome Eagle Eye tweeters each receive 15 watts, while the 4-inch Nomex composite midwoofers each receive 18, and the midwoofer's output is boosted by a front port. The drivers are crossed over at 3000 Hz, and frequency response is stated as 52 Hz up to 20,000. The BTSs accept Bluetooth, its version 5.0, which supports the aptX HD codec, and on the back panel of the main speaker, you'll find a pair of analog RCA inputs, a DIN connector for connecting the other speaker, and a mini RCA subwoofer output. When a subwoofer is connected, the BTS's output is cut off at 140 Hz, with the subwoofer receiving a full-range signal. On the right side of the main speaker, you'll find 3 knobs that control treble, bass, and a combined volume input. And that last control, along with pause, fast forward, and rewind, mute, as well as the on-off buttons for the sound field spatializer are duplicated on the included plastic remote control. Each speaker is about 10 inches tall, 6 inches wide, although the baffle itself is only 5, and a little over 6 inches deep. The speaker cabinets and decorative side pieces are both made of MDF, with the latter receiving a walnut patterned and colored vinyl wrap, while the black cloth grills are held in place by pins. And the main speaker, which houses the electronics, weighs around 7 pounds. The other speaker, which is connected by that DIN cable, weighs about 6. I listen to the R1700BTSs both as bookshelf speakers and as desktop speakers, sitting atop my Herbie's Audiolab Fat Dots, streaming high-res music from Qobuz. I used both Bluetooth from my iPhone 16 Pro, a PC with the aptX HD codec, and through my AudioQuest Dragonfly Cobalt USB DAC. And one cautionary setup note: when I first listened to the Bluetooth connection, I got something that sounded like the sonic equivalent of Minecraft, big and blocky and flat, kind of like a sonic wall. But one day, for reasons I never figured out, the full sound suddenly revealed itself, and it was a really big difference. So if you hear a pair of the BTSs that sound strangely flat and unexpressive, the issue might be with the Bluetooth. Otherwise, the first thing I noticed about the Edifiers is that they deliver a strong, full, and solid central image, have great imaging, and do an excellent job of reproducing acoustic space. The day they arrived, I set them up in my office, plugged them into my Mac's headphone jack, and streamed the first movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and was astonished to hear an orchestra in miniature laid out before me. The soundstage extends to the outside edge of the speakers and has a nice sense of depth, but it is noticeably short, stopping a bit above the top of the speaker when listening midfield. The angle of the baffles does help, and when I later set them up as bookshelf speakers and listened from further away, the height increased nicely while the imaging remained precise. And another quick note here: the Edifiers definitely work best in small rooms or up close. When I placed them in my regular system in my living room, about 9 feet from the listening position, the low end pretty much disappeared. They fared much better in my 10 by 10 second bedroom, which has 8-foot ceilings, and I was sitting about 6 feet away, but were most impressive when listening near field. And that's in large part because when listening from 3 or 4 feet away, the R1700 BTSs produce quick, solid, and punchy bass. Lady Gaga's Let's Dance and Marilyn Manson's Killing Strangers both throbbed with energy, filling the space ahead of me with low-frequency bass. This is part of what gives the Edifiers an impressive boogie factor of physicality and drive, and if you're a toe-tapping, head-nodding kind of listeners, the Edifiers deliver that with most kinds of music. They don't go especially deep. Edifier says its 52 Hz measurement is based on an industry standard using a -10 decibel lower limit, but they do sound surprisingly robust within their limits. Yellow's Oh Yeah was more of a torture test, and the strain became audible when I bumped up the volume. Big dynamic swings are also a challenge, given that the speakers don't play all that loudly compared to larger, more expensive systems. But in the context of a $230 pair of active speakers, their overall bass performance is very impressive, as is the way that bass is a full, coherent part of the music, smoothly integrated into the mid-range, rather than some one-note thumping. And this is a good time to mention the BTS's bass knob. When set at its default 12 o'clock position, the bass tends to muddy the lower mid-range and make the sound too heavy in the lower frequencies. Positioning the speakers too close to a front wall has the same effect, despite the port being on the front baffle. But in both cases, turning the bass down, when set up on my dining room table with about 9 inches to the front wall, I set the knob to about 10 o'clock, allowed me to find a pretty good balance, one that allowed male voices to retain weight and depth without getting thick. The Edifier's treble knob, on the other hand, will probably need to be turned up for more liveliness, a better sense of air, and really more volume to better match the mid-range. At its default position, the Silk Dome tweeter is too restrained, too rolled off, and while the tweeter overall is pretty smooth, it's also sometimes a bit loose. Cymbals, for example, had a good shimmer and sense of decay, but the initial strike was a bit blunt and muted. The Edifier's mid-range is clear and very revealing of voices. On The Eagle's Wasted Time, Don Henley's rasp comes across clearly, and on Old House, Adrienne Lenker's voice is very impressively reproduced. They delicately capture her breathing and vibrato, pitch and timbre, far better than I would have expected at this price point. Tonally, the sound top to bottom is slightly warm, but not overly so. When it comes to details, the R1700BTSs do an excellent job of things like capturing the metallic buzz of acoustic guitar strings and the nuances of vocals. However, they're not so good at resolving different musical lines when things get complicated, especially lower in the frequency range. Bass lines, for example, can get lost or flattened, while an orchestra's violin sections can end up sounding like one big mass. And while the musical core generally remains solid, the BTSs don't deliver the depth, separation, and subtlety of larger, more expensive systems. And while we're talking about limitations, in some ways the Edifiers were happier with the Bluetooth connection than with the Dragonfly. The Dragonfly's sound was deeper, more detailed, richer, more realistic, and definitely more enjoyable to listen to, but it also revealed more of the speaker's relative shortcomings. While the sound with Bluetooth wasn't as good, it didn't invite the same level of, frankly, nitpicking, and was still enjoyable and involving to listen to. Finally, the Soundfield Spatializer, with spatializer spelled with a C. Activating this function does, as promised, make the soundstage bigger in width, depth, and especially height. It also bumps up parts of the frequency range, making the mid-range more lively and exciting, and giving the treble more sparkle and air. To my ears, though, the effect went much too far, throwing off the good tonal balance, making the treble too bright, and messing up the imaging. Luckily, if you don't like it, you can simply leave it off. I didn't know what to expect from the Edifier R1700BTSs, but they impressed me from the very beginning. They're not perfect and won't offer the refinement that some listeners are looking for, but all of their limitations have to be considered in the context of their $230 price tag. And what they do well, such as the very clear mid-range, strong reproduction of vocals, sense of drive and rhythm, they do very well. I've never been in the market for a Bluetooth speaker. The only Bluetooth devices I've ever owned are Apple AirPods, but the R1700BTS has changed my mind. I'm going to buy a pair. And while I'll use them most often with my Dragonfly DAC, I'd still pay the price just for their Bluetooth performance. So if you're looking for a desktop or small room system, I think the Edifier's combination of sound quality, portability, and price make them worth an audition.